Hi, Sitaram Dass.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm good. Yeah.
Good, good. Thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to finally get a chance to sit down and chat. It's been a little bit.
Yeah. So to give everyone context, we have a retreat coming up, Memorial Day weekend, around this Sacred Community Project. So this is a project, as it's named, that was born out of Sitaram Das's efforts. And so I wanted to give some context today to kind of hear from him directly, from for us to get to know him better. I guess you and I got to really start to know each other about a year ago through Xander,
Yeah. Gosh,
and it's
has
been
been about a year.
a fun little journey virtually, and I'm looking forward to meeting your whole crew in the forest very soon.
Yeah.
So why
Yeah.
don't you, and I think most people who are watching this or listen to it, they kind of know my story in a nutshell, and a significant part of it was the limited time comparatively that I got to be in Ram Dass's presence. So yeah, I'm going to hand it over to you. Maybe you can share a little bit about just your path and your story, and also your time with Ram Dass, and how did this whole project become born into reality?
hmm Yeah. I've told
That's
this
okay.
story in so many different ways, and
Yeah,
today I'm going to tell it in three parts. So, part one is me as a young person in my early 20s, and that's when I first started to have my spiritual awakenings. And those awakenings first came through the use of psychedelic substances. And so that's always been a part of my story. I mean, it's just that was foundational. That's really what first allowed my mind to rest enough that I could see something else.
mm,
I also didn't have a lot of direction or guidance at that time. Uh, Suffered in a lot of different ways, had anxieties and heartbreak and all these things that, because of the way I was conditioned, I wasn't even really fully able to admit to myself, even, right, that I was going through. So, kind of a young ball of suffering with a lot of yearning for some greater meaning and truth in life. And along the way of my awakening journey, uh, I had a lot of passion, but very little direction. And so it was a lot of experimentation, trying different things, going to see shamans, seeing energy healers, experimenting with meditation. I know this is a story that a lot of people can relate to.
I definitely can.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like there's this enthusiasm, there's this willingness to like really dive into a practice fully, um, without fully knowing even what the fruits of that practice would be,
Mhm,
or how you should dive in fully.
mhm.
Um, and so it wasn't always pretty. I mean, really, as I'm saying this, I'll share this piece that I don't always talk about, but there's a period of time where I was into really intense pranayama practices where I would commonly black out from doing them. And I multiple times, like this happened more than once, where I'm sitting down in lotus position. The next thing I know, I'm on the ground and my head is bleeding because I hit a rock.
Mhm.
Um, so, I mean, that's what I mean. Like there was a lot of will uh, that didn't necessarily know how to harness itself.
Mhm.
And most people, that happens to them one time, they're like, okay, I'm gonna not do this practice anymore. For me, like for whatever reason, like it's like, well, I just need to, I don't know, I just need to be in a better posture next time. I mean, that's like where my mind was at.
Right.
So, but along the way, uh, I'm reading a lot of religious books, spiritual texts, studying different world religions. I come across the writings of Ram Dass, And I also, this isn't a story that's just unique to me. It felt like rather than me hearing something that I knew had a deeper truth and that I needed to translate in some way, it went to feeling like there was someone that was speaking directly to me in a language that was meant specifically for me.
Hmm.
It was like I just felt like there was someone that knew exactly what I was going through, these truths that I was accessing, and also understood how my mind worked. It was like someone that could just speak directly to me.
Hmm.
And so I kept gravitating more and more to his books. And at some point, now I'm 23 years old, and I have this realization. I obviously really want this. Like, I really want God. I want to live a life in spiritual truth. And the person that seems to be my number one teacher at this point is Ram Dass. He's older. He's not going to be living forever. Like, shouldn't I like apply some of this passion and energy? Like, shouldn't I put in some effort to try and see if I could meet him? And that was maybe the start of me bringing in a little bit more wisdom into my spiritual path.
And this is approximately what year?
Uh, 2012.
Okay.
No, nope. I left in 2012. 2009.
Okay. Gotcha.
2009. I'm 23 years old. Uh, so I have this thought. Maybe I should see if I can meet Ram Dass. Around this time, uh, I was living in Seattle, Washington. This was after one of my first experiments where essentially I attempted to live as some sort of like American renunciate, where I was like living out of my car in the desert of New Mexico. And that's where I was doing all this pranayama. And somewhere along the way, realized I was getting kind of ungrounded. So I moved back to Seattle, which is where I'd been living before that, decided to get a job. And I got a job that would help me open my heart. I was working with kids. And so it was still 100%. Everything I was doing was focused on me deepening my spiritual path. But now I'm doing it in a more grounded way. So I'm living in Seattle, getting into Ram Dass's teachings. I have this thought I should try and meet him. Around this time, I also felt like I was fulfilling my karma there in Seattle. Like, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I felt like I wanted to be closer to the earth. I just wanted to be closer to trees and nature. And so I was looking up different communes,
Mm.
doing research. So I have these two thoughts, and then they kind of combined into one thought. Well, if I don't know where I want to go, I just know I want to be closer to nature. And if Ram Dass lives in Hawaii, like, why don't I just find some farm in Hawaii to live on? And then maybe I would have the chance to meet him. I mean, that's where my mind was at. I tell this to a friend, and my friend, his name is Daniel. We're still friends. He says, well, why don't we just go to Hawaii for a trip and just meet him? And then we look up plane tickets. And we find round trip plane tickets from where we were in Seattle to Hawaii, this very specific window of time for $260 round trip. And I was essentially working a minimum wage job. And so that was essentially the max that I could afford.
Yeah.
A third friend, we're all living together in this shared house. A third friend walks in and sees this. He's like, wow, $260. Let's just buy him right now. And so it was like this perfect constellation of things lining up, just caught in the moment of all this excitement. And so we just buy these plane tickets with no connection, no direction, no, just this idea. So after this happens, I start having doubt, like, this doesn't really make sense. Um, what are we going to do when we're there? We don't know Ram Dass. So I kind of start reworking my mind, like, well, maybe this is just an exploratory trip, like to see if I want to live there. But I also write to the foundation at that time, ramdas.org. And
And was Dasima his caretaker at that point in time as well? Or yeah, okay.
mhm,
Mhm.
yeah, she was. And so I sent in an email, and it was my life story, essentially. How many of those have they received? Of like, this is why Ramdas is important to me. This is why I think I should meet him. Um, and I'm also I was a young writer at that time. Writing was a big practice of mine, and so um, yeah, basically I was full of words, and it all spewed out on this multiple page long email that I sent in. And uh, I know now the person that was answering emails at that time and the person that saw that email, and I still feel embarrassed that he has that like saved on his computer somewhere. But I didn't hear a response. And so doubt's setting in. Okay. Simultaneously around this time, I started obsessively listening to Krishna Das. And I had no idea that Krishna Das and Ram Dass knew each other. I had no idea they had the same guru. I didn't know anything about Krishna Das except I heard him in a yoga studio during Shavasana one day, and it felt like my soul was on fire.
Mhm.
So I'm listening to Krishna Das, reading Ram Dass. I start reading Miracle of Love, and I've written this email. I don't get a response. We watched the movie that I hadn't seen yet, Fierce Grace, which is the movie that was made shortly after Ram Dass's stroke.
Mhm.
And in the movie, Krishna Das is in the movie, and he tells the bus story, which is a story that I was really hyper fixated on at that time because, like, I just like, for some reason, I couldn't believe it. Like, I didn't know where to like let it sit in my mind. Um, but also, like, I didn't just discount it either. Like, I was thinking about it often, like maybe daily. So here's Krishna Das in this movie telling the bus story. And the bus story is that Ramdas is in this bus full of people, and they're trying to find Maharaji, but they don't know where he is. And someone on the bus says, "Hey, we should turn a right here on the road," because that's where the Kumbh Mela was held. It's this sacred place or this confluence of multiple rivers. But other people on the bus were like, the Kumbh Mela is already passed. There's nothing happening there. Like we're planning to go to Delhi. Like that's where we think we can find Maharaji. Like let's go up to Delhi. But it's Ramdas's decision. He's in charge of this bus, and he decides, okay, let's go. We'll make it a quick trip. Let's go. So it's him and a bus full of total 25 people. They make this detour and they go and they see Maharaji just standing there. There's no one there. It's this empty space, and it's just Maharaji walking along one of his longtime devotees, Dada. And so they're like, wow, Maharaji's here. They all get up, and Maharaji asks, like, it's not a big deal at all. He says, here, come follow me. They go follow him up this mountain. They get to the top, and this woman comes out of this home and she says, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Ramdas says, what do you mean? And she says, oh, I've been waiting for you. Maharaji told me to prepare food for 25 people. And Ramdas is like completely flummoxed because she knew that he was coming before he had made the decision to go. So that's the story. It's a well-known story from this book. And I'm telling it because I was so hyper fixated on it. And so here's this moment in this movie where I'm hearing Krishna Das tell this story out of his own mouth. And so I learned in this moment that not only did Krishna Das and Ram Dass have the same guru, but Krishna Das was on that bus.
Mhm.
And it was this moment where I felt like the veils had lifted and I got to see some of the inner workings of reality. It was also a moment where, and I still can't explain this, I just knew that I was going to meet Ram Dass. So the movie ends, and I have this thought. I wonder when Krishna Das is coming to Seattle for Kirtan. I'd never seen him. I'd only heard his music. And so look it up. And it turns out he's coming to Seattle the day before I'm leaving to go to Maui to see Ram Dass.
Of course.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, and it felt like my own personal bus story in that moment.
Mhm.
And again, I just knew it just validated what I already knew before I even looked that up. Like, oh, I'm gonna meet Ram Dass. And so I write another email to the foundation with a lot more confidence, just like, hey, just following up, I'm going to be there during this time. And I do get a response, and it felt very canned. It says, well, as you know, Ram Dass has a busy schedule and he's very focused on his healing. If he has the time, he may reach out. But I just knew, I just knew I was going to meet him. Behind the scenes, and now I always need to correct the story because Mike Kroll has heard me say this multiple times, and he wanted to give me a correction, which is that he was the one answering emails at that time,
Okay.
and he went and showed my email to Ramdas and Dasima. He said, "Hey, I think this young person. I think you should really meet him and talk with him. He sounds like he has an interesting story." And Ramdas was interested, but Dasima was weirded out by me. She was like kind of freaked out, and it was essentially her job to keep the
Yeah, I was
weirdos
gonna
away.
say her job. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Mike's like, well, I really think, and so he like follows up and like, hey, did you like, what do you think? Like, I don't know, and like, well, have you looked at the email yet? And I don't know. And so Mike Kroll prints out my email and he brings it and delivers it to Ramdas, and Ramdas reads it and he says, yeah, I want to meet this person. And so I only get the yes when we're already on Maui. And by the way, we had no money, so we were hitchhiking and sleeping on beaches, um, which I came to later learn isn't really all that safe to do there for various reasons. The hitchhiking, uh, there is a hitchhiking culture. Um, Sleeping on beaches, it's frowned upon, and mm, it's not necessarily safe. But we were young and naive, and that's what we were doing. So we get the call. We get to go to the house. We get to meet with Ramdas and see him on the back patio. And I still remember the moment of him coming down his wheelchair lift, right? Just like coming down from the heavens, like this person that I idealized. He was like a combination of like a rock star and my spiritual teacher. And I mean, it was just so many things. Um, and he obviously was very skilled at how to navigate that and to help people feel at ease in his presence. And he did, and he really created a space for us. I was there with my two friends, but especially me, to kind of tell my story. And he answered questions. And in that meeting, my friend said this because I wouldn't have had the nerve, even though it was my idea. My friend said, Ramdas, we just decided that we want to do anything we can to be as close to you as possible. So if you have any work you need done around the house, like we'll do it. And Ramdas says, well, I've been given this home to live in as long as I'm alive, but the property's too big for us to manage. And so we always need help. If you were around, maybe there would be something you could do. And there was just no question. That maybe to me was an absolute yes. And I was going to do anything I could in my life to make that happen. And so after that trip, um, I I made a plan to just like work as much as I could at my job and to save up as much money as I could. And I was going to go to Maui 2 months after that. I'd found a guy in Paia, this little beach town, who said I could sleep on his back porch, and I would just pay him some money to help with like utilities. So that was it. So I wrote an email to that. Now I had a direct email to them and to Dasima, and I said, hey, I'm planning to come, and you know, I think I asked if I could sleep on their property at first, and I didn't hear a response. And again, unbeknownst to me, Dasima was weirded out by me. Me offering to sleep on like yard like didn't help
Right.
anything.
Right.
So I sent a follow-up email and I made sure to say it this way because I didn't want to give myself any unneeded anxiety. I said, okay, I'm coming this date. I have a place to stay. No need to write me back. I'll let you know when I'm on island.
That's called the preemptive close.
Uh-huh. So that's part one of my story.
I like that.
Uh, Part two is I'm on Maui and I'm living in this guy's back porch. I connect, I call, a few times until finally Dasima responds and says that I could come at the specific day and time and come and work in the garden. So I go. I think I'm volunteering. Um, she ends up paying me at the end of the day and says I could come back the next day.
Hmm.
And I still remember that moment where I was like, oh, I did it. I'm Ram Dass's gardener. And it felt like I found my career. Like I could just do that the rest of my life and be happy. Like I'd won the lottery.
Yeah.
So I keep showing up. I build a relationship. Dasima starts to see that, yeah, I'm young and maybe a little naive, but not as unbalanced as maybe I'd first seen. And so eventually, they asked me if I would move in and live there at the house with them as one of the caretakers full time. And I'd been on Maui 9 months at that point when I moved in. And that's really what started my building a relationship with Ram Dass. And there's a lot of stories I could tell about that, but I'll just stop and just say that the number one thing that I got from it was um, just being around his presence on a regular basis. It, it was like I related to him as a human. He was a human being, just like any other human being I've met. He
Mhm.
had a great sense of humor. He could be grumpy in the morning sometimes. Uh, he had his own process of coming to terms with his aging and dependency. But that presence and that state of what he called loving awareness, it really was his baseline. It wasn't just something that he turned on stage
Mm.
or his one-on-ones with people where he could just completely shine. Like that person was the only person that existed, and it was just love was the only thing that existed. But even in the mundane moments throughout the day when he wasn't on, that was still the baseline.
Mm.
Like I
Mm.
could still remember what it felt like just driving him to his doctor's appointments.
Mm.
Um, or I'd go up and see him in his study, and he had been up there for hours. And I go up to see if he needs anything. And I catch him just sitting there in his chair, looking out the window. He's not reading anything. He's not watching TV or looking at his phone or, right. He's literally just sitting there content. And he'd been doing that for hours, just staring out his window. I remember one time I asked him, Ram Dass, what spiritual practices do you still do? Right. Because I had followed all of his teachings, all these years of teachings and the different practices he had engaged in. And here's this person that seemed to me like he was at the pinnacle of the path. And I asked him that, and there was that long pause that he would often do. And he said, I just hang out with my guru. And and that was really the core of it. Later I heard him say, I hang out with Maharaji and I love everything in the universe.
Mm.
And he did. I mean, he saw his stroke, the pain in his body, uh, the floor, the ceiling, the people that came to see him. They were all manifestations of God
Mhm.
sent to him from his guru, and and he just loved them. And and so I saw from that of love being both a state of presence that we can cultivate, but it's also the practice itself.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like Ramdas loved his pain and he loved other people, he also really rested in a state of love. And because I had to drop my projections when I was living with him, I had to see him as another human being.
Mhm.
It that was the last gift, really, was that this loving awareness wasn't just something that's special that
Mm.
he has because of how great he is. He is great, he is amazing. But it's actually our birthright,
Mhm.
and that even me, uh, right now, not only is this something that I can cultivate, but I don't have to wait for some future state of perfection.
Mhm.
Love can be real right now in this moment with all
Right.
my stuff, with all my insecurities, with my imperfections, with my resistance. All of that can be held in love in this moment. I don't have to wait. And that is really the gift that uh, I carry forward in my life now, and is really at the heart of Sacred Community Project, which we could talk about in a little bit. Um, so that's my story in two parts. The third part has to do with Sacred Community Project and all of that, but maybe this is a point for me to stop my monologue and yeah.
No, it's been beautiful. I mean, it's funny, a few things. One was I was just spending time with East Forest not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, and a similar thing, asking, explain, how did you get there, and how did it all happen? And it's like there's so many of these universal stories where it like starts out with, doubt and this isn't going to happen. And I guess with him, he was talking about recording the music, and he was talking to Raghu Marcus, and he was like, I could do this, but I'd have to go like be with him in person. And it was like, everyone wants to do it, it's like, and so it seemed like he wouldn't get there. And it's like, I know for me and the limited exposure I got to have, I can just feel your experience, that universal experience of that first time that you're within like the physical realm, close to this being, and you've heard all these stories, and you've heard, it's just been the central part of a lot of our spiritual practice. So yeah, just getting to hear that from you, yeah, it always conjures up all these feelings in my body in a beautiful way. Like whenever I hear somebody's first time story, and it seems to be that there's like a universal Dasimo story, only because East Forest was the same way. He finally got permission, like go meet with Ram Dass, show up on a Tuesday for kirtan, just go show up. And so he shows up, and someone waved him in. They're like, yeah, go sit over there next to him on the couch. And so he just sat there really tight, really tense. And he's sitting there for just a moment. Dasimo goes, get out of there. You're crowding Ram Dass. And he was like, oh my gosh. So there's like, these universal things. So it's beautiful to hear your unfolding of that, and just having the courage and the trust, that it was going to go a certain direction. Um, and I guess for myself, I always talk about love as like it's a palpable force of the universe. It's like, and so I feel like within the Ramdassian world, the Ramdas community, that there is this perception of love as something beyond a Hallmark card and beyond a concept. And it seems like that's what the Sacred Community Project is, a direct embodiment of something, and not an idea, but it seems like a direct experience. So I'd love to hear more about that that whole unfold.
Yeah. Well, what also came to mind, because I when Dasima comes up, I feel compelled to also share the other side of it. As I got to get to know her, um, and it points to service being the natural unfolding of this palpable love that we're talking about. So, in the period of time when I was there as a gardener, uh, before that, I moved. They asked me to move in. I got to have my first one-on-one with Ram Dass, where I mean, it was incredible. It was just his presence just opened up the reality of God, and we got to sit that together.
Mhm.
Um, and then after he told me that he wanted to see me again in 2 weeks, and I tell Dasima this, and the invitation never came. And so I would like check in and I would like ask, and she's like, oh, okay, yeah. And then, and during this time, I'm working in the garden, like, multiple days a week. And I see that people are constantly coming in to see Ram Dass. And I just had this moment of opening and just realizing, like, oh, like everyone comes here because they want something from him. And maybe I just need to make it my job to just be here to be of service to him.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt spontaneous, a spontaneous realization, like something deeper speaking to me. And I made an internal commitment about that. It was shortly after that I was invited to move in, and that was a powerful thing for me. When I was there at the house, uh, I got to really see uh, that Dasima really, I mean, she was just there to be of service to him. And like, yeah, she's a human and she's from Philadelphia and she definitely has her own stuff and her own quirky personality. But but I really got to see what was underpinning some of that fierceness that sometimes other people could experience of her as the gatekeeper, which was just like this incredibly soft and immensely deep love, like
Yeah.
expansive, and sometimes it'll show like it kirtans if you ever see her, and just the tears that well in her eyes. And but what I learned from her is what service really means. Like she was not there to have her own needs met.
Mm-hmm.
Her own needs were being met through the service.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why she received the name Dasima, right, which means mother of service.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a name that came to Ramdas in a dream, actually. And he gave that to her. And so I mean, I still have just the utmost respect for her. And she's now there living as the president of Hanuman Maui.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that was not a choice that she came up with on her own. It was something that she was essentially put up to. Uh, After Ramdas died, this will tie into the birth of Sacred Community Project. A lot of us that had been previous caregivers just like went there to be at the house, to be with the body, and just had it was an incredible experience of just praise and ritual. His body laid out on ice in his study for over 3 days, and we would just stay up late through the night and sing bhajans to his body, and do arti to him. I mean, it was just such a all these rituals that we had learned and these songs, like we would just sing them to his body, and it was such a rich experience. During that time, there was a lot of conversations that were happening, like what's going to happen to the house. There's no plan for that to still exist. Um, Dasima's plan was that she was going to just get a condo somewhere. Um, but we had this council meeting, and just the living room is packed. It was a circle lining the whole outward, all the walls. It was like as many people that could fit in that circle as possible were there. And it was a near unanimous decision that that this home was a sacred space and that it needed to still exist. And I still remember the moment um, when someone said to Dasima, "Well, Dasima, like, what are you gonna do? Like, are you still gonna live here? Like, don't you have like a life to live?" And Dasima's words in that moment, they were so immediate and so impactful, and they felt so authentic. And she said, "Ramdas is my life." And and so she had no plan, but when she saw this collective need, she agreed to
Mm-hmm.
stay. And now young devotees and people can come there and develop their sadhana. And there's now this Hanuman temple. Um,
Is that the house that Wayne Dyer gave him back in the day, or is that different? Do you know?
so Wayne Dyer didn't give him that house, but the person that provided that house was a connection through Wayne Dyer.
Okay.
Wayne Dyer had put out,
Like a
he was
fundraising
connected to a
call.
lot of like wealthy people, and so
Gotcha.
he loved Ram Dass and viewed him as like his main teacher.
Right.
So he put out an email list asking for help because at that point in time, Ram Dass needed it. He had zero retirement plan. He had given away the majority of the money that he made to service projects, and his most top selling books, like he didn't even get royalties from. Like he had no plan for not being able to support himself through lecturing anymore. Um, that was also a kind of a beautiful thing to see, is just mm, how he lived a life of service, but also what enabled him to really deepen into that love in that last stage of his life was the community showing up to serve him.
Mm.
So a few months before he died, he went to Taos for the opening of the new Hanuman temple. And Ram Dass he was the impetus for the creation of the first Hanuman temple there. And 40 years before this point. And he had not left Maui in like 15 years uh, because it wasn't really safe for him. And so he's essentially on death's door. This is, I think, 5 or 6 months before he died. He flies to go to Taos to see the opening of the new temple. And I went there. That was the last time that I saw him. And it was incredible. Seeing him again was incredible. It was like at that point, there's this teaching in the devotional literature. There's this term called paramaprem, and it's like the terminal state of bhakti, of this path of love, where there's just like nothing but love left.
Mm-hmm.
And and I don't know if there was remnants of other things there or not, but that's all I could see at that stage when I saw him. It was just this vast oceanic presence, and it was incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I also got to reconnect with a lot of community and that I hadn't connected with in a long time. And something about the combination of all these forces on my plane ride home from that, I wrote out, scribbled on a piece of scratch paper, what ended up being the founding words of the Sacred Community Project.
Mm-hmm.
And after Ram Dass died, there was like this shift in my being where rather than being so focused on him, uh, I became much more focused in spiritual community, in the satsang. Like it was like all of a sudden that became just the highest importance to me. That became my most important practice.
Mm-hmm.
And really the Sacred Community Project was birthed out of that. And so Sacred Community Project is an inner spiritual collective devoted to awakening sacred community in the world. And we do this primarily through our mission statement, which is lowering the barriers of access to contemplative devotional practices.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that means is envisioning a world where this birthright of loving awareness can be accessed by anyone, regardless of income, regardless of background, regardless of if someone is in a prison or they're isolated somewhere in the middle of America, right? Creating a framework so that people have access to this deep and nourishing fruit uh, without barriers.
Mm-hmm.
And we do this through online support groups. We do this through free and donation-based spiritual support. People reach out and someone can meet with them one-on-one over Zoom. We do this through some prison outreach. I was just in a prison, gosh, last October or November down in San Diego. People had reached out. So I went there to give a talk and lead some chanting. And we do this through sliding scale retreats, like what we do on the West Coast in British Columbia, and then what we're going to do in May at Just Love Forests.
Hmm.
And this is all, um, it's all centered on two things. One, this loving awareness that I've been talking about, that I directly experienced and learned about through Ram Dass. Um, but then also seeing that this loving awareness is best actualized in sacred community.
Hmm.
And so that's really um, the driving logic structure of even how like retreats are set up,
Mhm.
is creating a container so that sacred community can be actualized, where we're practicing and actualizing this loving awareness together and through each other.
Mhm. And can you speak to, you use the word like interspiritual. Can you just give some more color to people that, you just put in your own words, like what does that mean? People of all paths, like who could or should feel drawn to this and why?
Uh-huh. So, uh, interspirituality is a modern term describing an ancient truth. And that ancient truth is that there's all these different religious and spiritual paths that are out there, but there is a common underlying unitive shared truth. Right? It's just one truth about this reality. And it's talked about and actualized in different ways. There's different paths, there's different words to call it, there's different practices, and some of them can even seemingly contradict themselves. It's not that like all religions are the exact same, right? They're obviously different and differences matter, but there is an underlying truth. And it can be called by many names, but we have to call it something. And so the Sacred Community Project stance is that we call this loving awareness. And this loving awareness, it's deeper than the mind, it's deeper than the body, it's deeper than our thoughts, it's deeper than our sensations, it's deeper than our social roles. It's that awareness itself that holds all of it within it. And this awareness is the essence of love. And when we start to awaken to that, we also see that our thoughts and our sensations and our experiences and even our identities, they're not separate. It's like they're waves in this ocean of love. And because the teachings say uh, that the destination and the path are one and the same, our stance is we don't have to wait to experience love later. We can practice love now.
Mm.
And so we can love our thoughts, we can love ourselves, we can love each other, and we can practice doing that. And so that's the loving part of loving awareness. The awareness part is that uh, we can also practice now releasing resistance in the mind, right? Because it's that resistance that prevents us from love and being loving. And so that's going to be meditation practices. That's going to be things along with that. And love practices might be things like chanting kirtan, um, or doing partner exercises, right? Practicing being authentic uh, in conversation and how we show up at dinner table conversations, right? So that's really, when we say it's inner spiritual, we might have practices from Buddhism or practices from what's called bhakti yoga. Um, uh, but it's also specific, like we have a specific framework of loving awareness that we feel like is universal. And
Mhm.
so, who this retreat is for is anyone who felt inspired by anything that I just said. Um, if you want to come, uh, you should probably come. it's probably meant for you. It's mm, there's kind of this shared resonance. Like a big part of this retreat is like creating a space where we can all find each other, right? Like this extended family that we're all part of that we just haven't met yet.
Yeah.
And how we show up is that we just feel called to be there for some strange reason that we don't know why. Yeah.
I can definitely relate to that in my own life for sure.
Me too.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, is there anything else you wanted to share with people? I think that gives like a nice evolution of thanks for sharing your story and thanks for sharing some of your memories with Ram Dass. I'm sure we'll get to hear some more throughout time with you. But is there anything else you wish to share with people?
I guess this is coming up for me. Uh, I don't fully understand what drives me to do all the things that I do, right? Because it's like on the surface, running a nonprofit, putting on retreats, like mm, that can sound cool, and I think it is, but it's also a lot of work, and I put in a lot of work into this beyond all the other things that I do in my life. Um, and so sometimes I ask myself, like, why am I doing this? Because it feels like there's something else compelling me. Um, and part of it is a mystery to me, and part of it is just the way that I think grace is unfolding in my life. But my best guess is that, uh, especially now, with Ram Dass not being in a body, me finding ways to be of service to this spiritual path, uh, this is what's keeping me connected. This is what's keeping me connected to Ram Dass. This is just me keeping me connected to Maharaji and Hanuman. This is what is keeping this love front and center in my own life. And so, uh, yeah, I mean, I'm doing this, first and foremost for myself. And the reason for us, and really for me personal, I mean, this is my, like, I don't feel like uh, I like teach Ram Dass. Um, I'm just sharing the teaching. I'm just sharing the deepest truth that I can muster in the moment. But at the same point, it's just that Ram Dass has touched like every aspect of my being. And so there's no way for me to share those things without like talking about him and the way that he's impacted my life. And so and even like the languaging of this retreat, like that tries to be captured like this is a sacred community retreat, um, but it's it's a sacred community retreat coming out of this lineage of Maharaji and Ram Dass and centering the teachings that um, really I've gained from this lineage of Buddhism and Bhakti Yoga, right? The awareness practices, the letting go of clinging in the mind, and the practices we do to open the heart. Um, and so uh, that's the that's the most authentic way that I have at this point in time to share. And so, because of that, the majority of people that, not the majority, all the people that are involved with Sacred Community Project and the majority of the people that end up coming to Sacred Community Project retreats are people that often feel connected to Ram Dass and his teachings in some way. Um, it's not always true, but I would say an overwhelming majority. And that's a big part of us, mm, that idea, that shared resonance and us finding each other is, for whatever reason, there's this group of people of us out in the world that, there's a shared language of teachings that just resonate with us. And there's this shared felt, um, it just feels good to be together in ways that we don't understand. And I need that. Like I put in this work because I need that. I need to be among that type of sacred community. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel similarly about the forest. It's like I always tell people, they're going on and on about the positive impact. I'm like, yeah, but you have to understand, I'm receiving it the same way from myself,
Yeah.
you know, in an odd, selfish way, in a non-selfish, selfish way. It's really a beautiful thing. So, well, thank you so much. I'm honored to get to co-create with you all this year, and excited about
Me too.
our go at this. So I look forward to calling in all the beings across the country who feel drawn to the forest, and getting to have a good time in the spring, well, early summer.
Yeah. Me
So
too. Yeah. I'm excited.
thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Bala.
Lots of love.